Sweet. Well, welcome everybody to the District House. My name is Hannah Jo, and I'm so grateful to be seated here tonight with Kat Walsh. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you guys.
So I just know you as a super articulate and embodied, expressive psychonaut. And I'm really grateful to know that facet of your being. And tonight, I look forward to exploring the fullness of who you are and who you've been. So, would you like to provide the audience with a more proper title or introduction of who you are and maybe some of the other hats you wear in the world?
Of course. Thank you so much. And thank you guys for coming out here tonight. My name is Kat Walsh. How many of you have been to a marquee event? Okay. How many of you have not been to a marquee event? Am I new? Okay. Okay, good. All right, cool. Awesome. I'm the founder of a psychedelic podcast called Trip on This. And I just want to say this night for me is actually tied into a greater story that I'm going to be talking about, which is this is a manifestation made possible. I've been dreaming of telling this story for 4 years because of psychedelics, and I've been projecting it into TED Talks and things, and I've been this is the first time I'm actually getting to share it in front of a live audience. And so it's very special to me for you guys to share in this moment. It's not that I'm new to the stage, but it is new to share me on the stage. And so yeah, I can hear my voice is a little, woo, I'm usually like, hey, yes. Okay, but it's on me. So I'm a little more reserved, but she'll come out. She'll come out. There's jokes in here. So yeah, should I just begin? Yeah. So I was thinking about this. Like this is a story really where for me, psychedelics have been so tied to my courage and taking a leap of faith in trusting the unseen, trusting intuition, starting over, not knowing how I was going to do it. Everybody looking at me like, girl, you are out of your mind. And I was like, probably, maybe. But I was going to go with it anyway. And I think the best way I can talk really about the story is to tell you who I was before psychedelics. So to take you back, I grew up in the Valley. I have always known pressure. I was a softball player. By the time I was 13, I was very good. And so at around that age is when they start to say like, okay, you don't play for fun anymore. You're playing for, an end goal. And I grew up in a lower middle class family. So there was not a college fund. It was, you're going to get good enough to play softball and the goals of full ride. So I from basically like 13 on, it has always been like there's been a serious tone to just performance. That's a good thing in a capitalistic world. It's not maybe the best for just a balanced, happy, stress-free life. I was a pitcher. I got a full ride at Villanova, so I was able to achieve that first milestone. I then graduated and I only had big, sexy jobs after that. And big, sexy jobs are really cool to talk about, but they also come with an enormous amount of stress to perform because everybody wants that job. So I came out, I got a job at the ESPN X Games. I went into a large talent agency called CAA, where I was looking after movie stars and millions of dollars, and I had no idea what I was doing. Like, I can't believe they put like a 23-year-old in charge of a $15 million fucking contract. Like, I'm like, hello, people. Like, I don't think so. And the agents and the environment was so scary for me. It's actually like if who's seen Entourage? Okay, worse, scarier. Like, to me, Ari Gold was, benign compared to, like, what was actually happening there, and that was my first job, so I actually really besides from, like, basically the X Games for just a short period of time, I had no concept of what an like, is this not normal how we're treated? Is getting screamed at every day and being so scared to walk into my building every day, is this not how we feel? Going to work, I had no idea. And so my spirit basically kicks me out of there. I had a couple bosses that would just one was a screamer, but I ended up learning him. The other was a screamer, and peace was his chaos. So he had to be in this constant fear spiral with me in order for him to stay feeling calm. What that looked like for me was quite literally getting like verbally abused every day until one day I snapped. And I just started screaming back, you guys. Like I just started to scream back. And this was, to me, I thought this was, I'm going to be an agent. This is going to be my life. Meanwhile, if you asked me what I liked about that job, I would have told you it's saying what I do. That's it. I liked saying what I do because I liked the feedback that I would get from people. I liked that I was impressing people. Oh, wow, who do you get to talk to? And when you're young and you have that carrot kind of dangled, you're like, yeah, I think this is fine, except I realized it was not. And one day I was fired. I had gone to HR. I had gone to a few other places, like heads, and I was like, please take me off this desk. And one day I was fired, and I was so humiliated by this that I lied to everybody. That I was like, oh, it just was time to go. I couldn't. And so I was so lost and scared, and I never trusted life. Everything was hard for me. Like the idea of flow, like flowing through our life, I didn't even know what that meant, actually. Like there was no concept of flow. Everything was knocking down walls to try and get the thing because I was so scared not to perform in these places. And I moved on to another like TV development kind of role, which was very similar. I went into marketing, overseeing BMW. And again, there was so much of this like, look what I'm doing, look what I'm doing. But that was getting emptier and emptier as I got older. And around 31, I'm 38, 31 or 2, 31-ish. Okay. Around then. I was at this ad agency and I thought to myself, is this it? Is this all we're doing? I am both stressed and bored. Like, I don't know how I'm going to do stressed and bored for the rest of my life. Like, that is a vicious combination. And I was like, okay, what are we going to do about stressed and bored? And I think the first opening for me was, is this it? You know, when we hit moments in our life, whether it's through grief or, something shocking happens in our life, or you just get to a place where you're so low where you're like, this is unacceptable, but I don't even know what to do about that. At this point, like, I did psychedelics when I was 16, but like I didn't do it again for 10 years because I knew nothing about set and setting and I scared myself really bad. So I never went back to it. And at that point, I felt like I was on my hands and knees, kind of asking the universe just questions, like question marks. Mind you, I didn't have a spiritual background at this point either. I would have called myself spiritual, but there was no practice. There was no flow. There was no anything other than like a word. And so there was nothing for me to lean back on in my faith and my hope. And so one day ayahuasca had kind of entered the picture, if you will. And a friend of mine did an ayahuasca journey, and I had talked to her medicine woman, and I knew that ayahuasca had found me that day. And I came to that ceremony. I took that so seriously. And if you've never done ayahuasca or really any plant medicine, the more reverence that you give to any experience, it's like a direct feedback loop of what you get from it. It's like what you give is what you get, right? And especially in the psychedelic space. And so I had gone in and I took my dieta very seriously. And the trip was, I thought it was going to be hard. Here's the thing I wanted to say. I was ready for it to be as hard as it needed to be. I was like, I am ready to see. And my intention was, please put me on the path. Please put me on the path of what I'm meant to be doing. Because like I am lost and I don't know what to do. So that experience wasn't like a booming voice of God comes in. Like it was just experience. And I was listening to other people on their journeys. But it wasn't until the next day, I had been sobbing all day, but it felt good. Like I wasn't even crying about anything. I was just like crying for times in my life that I never cried. I remember like I had this vision of this time when I was in like 6 years old and this boy had humiliated me and made fun of me like physically, and how much suddenly that memory came back and I had just stored it away because it hurt so bad. But at a young age, I just had no idea how to process that. And so all these memories are coming up in what felt like to me just a healing, like a, oh, here's that. And then I just filed it away and I was finally just, "Phew, you don't need that. We can let that one go. This can go, you know?" And so I'm at the beach and I have a stick and I'm writing and I just wrote, I love, and I just looked for a second and I just wrote you. And it was the first experiential moment of real self love, like really understanding in that moment what that meant. And I realized what my whole journey was about was around self love and all the ways, and realizing all the ways that I would dishonor myself by not sleeping when I was tired and just having coffee, by just the hours that I was these crazy 2 in the morning, I'm staying up, the ways in which I wouldn't listen to my body when it was yelling at me, screaming at me, like, please, cat. Like, that's not a loving action to just be like, shh. I would never do that to a kid if they needed something from me. And so it opened up. I realized, oh, okay, so I was asking to be put on the path. And the path, I guess, is self love. And so all of 2019 was all about that. The first half was like I went off dating apps. That was the first thing, because dating apps were making me feel like I was in lack. I felt separate. I was always looking for love outside of myself. I was always looking for information outside of myself. Everything was outside of myself. How do I get it? How do I get that? And if I couldn't get it, then I was lost. And I didn't even understand the concept of like self-generating all of those emotions, all of the information, all the knowing, even with our physical bodies. Like, what do we actually need? Maybe we should meditate. Ask ourselves, you know? And so I went on this just like very practical integration of like taking bubble baths and dancing and like, you know, just the fun stuff. And it was starting very slowly to transform. And then a friend of mine, and this is so long, by the way. I'm not used to just like talking to people for this long. So if you guys just like need a break for a second, you're like, Kat, love the story, just like raise your hand. Feel free to like chime in, ask me questions. Should I keep going? You guys with me? Okay. All right. All right. All right. I mean, you know, I'm a podcast host, right? I'm always I'm very aware of like just one person talking forever. Okay.
You're allowed to take a space.
Okay. All right. All right. All right. All right. It was actually, it's a good break because this next part is just like really when psychedelics blew my mind, you guys. Like, oh my, oh my. Didn't know what I was going to be doing. Okay. So it is now the middle of 2019. A friend of mine, an old friend of mine, was a composer and he had created an audio visual experience. And he didn't say anything about it, and he's like, "I created it specifically for mushrooms." He had saw a bass nectar, and I guess I had never seen a bass nectar show. Is anybody familiar with bass nectar? Okay. So a lot of his shows are like just the super visual, super psychedelic. And he's like, "But he's gonna up the ante, basically, my friend." And I was like, "Okay." I had no idea. I'd never seen anything like that. And there was only he happened to be a multimillionaire. Big, big composer, okay? And he had a studio in his house. So we now he's put up this screen and it just kind of looks like a big screen, maybe like this, but I guess it's like 8K technology that he has here. And we're tripping. At this point, I had not done mushrooms for 3 years. I did one trip before, and that trip was like very intense for me. And I realized I had a lot of undealt with emotions. So it wasn't a fun trip. I always think like, I think a lot of people think mushrooms are like fun necessarily. Like, no, not always. You know, it could be kind of heavy. And so I hippie flipped for the first time. So I took MDMA and mushrooms. So I was tripping. I hadn't tripped like that like ever. So I was like, whoa, like this is crazy. And I'm with a community of people. We go in and we start watching this show. in which I have never experienced awe like that before. Like straight up wonder. I was like, this this experience is so outside of the realm. Like I have never experienced like joy like this before. And it showed me my capacity for joy. Like that's the first thing that psychedelics did was I didn't even realize that I could feel so much fun ever. Like I didn't even know that that kind of joy and fun and awe and wonder existed until this moment. I was like, wow, world peace. That's all I can say. The whole world could feel like just tap in here, world peace tomorrow. And so we continued to watch the show. He would continue to update it. And so I was like tripping like a lot in 2019. Like we would have these like bender weekends basically of just watching this show and doing so many mushrooms. And we were in community. And so I was having so much fun. And I started to begin to see myself almost from that witness standpoint. You guys know what I'm talking about? When you actually can kind of like, I know I'm talking, but there's a part of me that is also watching this whole thing go down. I began to become aware of that type of a consciousness. And I started to see like, Kat, look how good you are in a crowd. Look how good you are with your friends. Like you're funny, like you're social with them. Like I had never saw myself actually in a room like that. So I had never valued myself in the same way. Like I had this kind of a gauze over seeing myself. And so if you can't see yourself, then how can you ever really, do something big, right? Like you have to really believe in yourself to like really, I think, like achieve something in this world. And so as this is all going, I'm now integrating, but I'm not from like I don't think of it as a like psychedelic integration. Like it wasn't like that. I just was. I was just crying and having revelations and my evolution as a person I felt like was on a hyperdrive. I I feel like I gained 40 years of just information and like just like all of this different stuff. And I finally I okay, bear with me on the timing. It was I knew, okay, so let's now call it November 2019. I'm watching the show and I say to myself, I can do anything that I want out of nowhere. I can do anything I want. And I remember it took me aback because I'm like having a dance party, right? And then like this comes in. But I took that thread and I said, I can do anything that I want. What do I mean by that? Like, huh? And I let that question sit there, like, and I didn't know what it meant for me, except that something had changed very dramatically, even though it was very simple. And if I wasn't paying attention to it, I would have missed a very key moment of, you've never thought like that, Kat. You were a put yourself in a box girl. This is what my resume is. Therefore, I can only get this level job, girl. So to now be thinking you could do anything you want is profound, even though you're the only one privy to this knowledge right now. And so I realized I was like, I want to create wealth and I'm going to create, like I just began to like suddenly begin thinking like, well, why can't I? Why can't I do that? Like this feels kind of obvious, but I just didn't know how. And so I set the intention that night and I said, oh gosh, what did I say? Something like, please, like, like, show me the opportunity that I'm meant to do and give me the courage to take the leap of faith. I somehow knew in my spirit that it was going to require a leap of faith once I knew the thing, because at this point I just didn't know the thing. I was like, okay, I could do anything I want, but like what? I've never been passionate about anything except for fun and dancing. Like I love to have a great time. I was like, not sure how to monetize that, nor do I want to, maybe. Like I think I just want to like have that be my thing to enjoy. So I was like, okay. So I let that sit. But when a big intention like that happens, this is the patience of life, is like it doesn't necessarily show up like that. But it's clocked. Somehow in the greater fabric out here, it's like noted. So now I'm just changing, growing, blah, blah, blah. July 2020, we were all very good. We did COVID tests and we got together and we're all like, okay, we're good. And so we spent it kind of like insular in July 2020. And it was the greatest weekend, top 5 weekends of my life. I just the way from fun to seeing myself, all the things. I had also been doing tantra. So for those of you that don't know tantra, it's like kind of basically using your sexual energy and your creative energy and your spiritual energy and kind of combining and realizing these things are all the same. And so I was also getting very magnetic around this time. I was like, okay, like I am feeling myself at this point. I was like, all right. And so I set the intention and I just said, I'm ready. I'm ready for whatever I'm meant to do to come into my life. 1 week later, 1 week, I get a call from a comedian that I hadn't spoken to in 6 years. 6 years, not a single word from this man. And I get a random call. I see it, almost didn't answer it because I'm like, what? But I answer it and I was like, hey. And he's like, hey, been a second. With the pandemic, I can't travel. I can't like do my shows because he was an actual, like he did this for work. He's like, I'm thinking about doing a podcast. I remember that you're funny and we tried to do a show some time ago. And he's like, do you want to give it a shot? He's like, we could just do 1 episode and see. And I thought to myself, I was met with both fear and excitement at once. I was like, like, I don't know. But a lot of people had always told me, they're like, you have a great voice for radio. And I was like, yeah, I would like to use my voice. And then or like voiceover. And then I realized that's an actual profession. Like those are very talented people. It's not just having a voice, like, unfortunately, and there's like a whole process that goes into that. But so I was like, okay, you know what? Let's just give it a shot. And I went into that and it was as if I had done it all my life. I stepped into that as if I had been a podcast host for years. And I was like, that's weird. Oh, I didn't know that I could do this, but like, here we are. Like, okay, that's fun. And so we have this great talk. The next day, he says to me, Kat, I just watched the show. I love it. Do you want to do this together? I'll put the money into it. I'll do the marketing. We'll do the whole thing. Do you want to really do this? And I was like, oh my God, yes. 2 hours later, I'm laid off from my other marketing job right after I had said yes. Now, the beauty of this is, mind you, this is 2020, right? So we're in the middle of COVID. It's July. I've felt very fortunate that I even had a job by this point because I really, there was no clients. And they had even given me a small severance. So not only did this happen, but suddenly I had a little buffer. And I remember I called my parents. First, we go into panic, obviously, because you have to start there because nobody just starts enlightened about what just happened. You're like, fuck, I just got laid off. Like, now what? But then I was like, okay, but you know what? I just said yes to this podcast that I'm going to do. Like, maybe this is my new direction. And so I just went in that direction. Okay, guys, that podcast did not work out. It was only the first episode that was good. Everything beyond that, our flow, our style, like everything about that, I was like, I'm confused, God. Like, what is happening here? Like, this is not, I did not see this coming. And I realized though, there were so many things. I knew that there was creative differences in the way that he saw the world. Like, that I was just like, I am just not aligned with that. That's not my humor. That's not funny to me. I find that offensive. Like, that is not me. But now I'm like, well, shoot, you're the one with the brand. That's what he does. He's a comedian. He's a touring comedian. He had the money. He had the whole thing. And I was like, well, what am I going to do? And I chose my values over anything else. And I was like, I just can't. And so I basically had ended it, do a mushroom trip. I see all my friends, or like my two like close girlfriends at the time, and I'm telling them, and of course we're like tripping, and I'm like telling them everything that's happening. We're doing like some oracle cards, things like that. And I say to myself, I'm like, I don't know what to do. I was like, I just found the thing that I loved to do. Like, what? And I was like, well, maybe I just do a podcast myself. And I was like, okay. And I was like, but what am I going to talk about? And then my friend, my other girlfriend, reminded me that 3 months prior, I had said to her, wouldn't it be funny to do a podcast where we just eat a bunch of mushrooms and talk shit? Wouldn't that just be hilarious? Like, we should do that. And she goes, Kat, remember? She's like, you wanted to do a podcast about psychedelics. I was like, that's it. I'm going to do a podcast about the thing that is making this possible. The fact that I even believe that I can pull this off, not as a hobby, but like literally do it. That is literally the story that I want to tell through Trip on This, is the story of moving through limitation. There is no way every piece of this was designed. If it wasn't for him, I would have never discovered that podcasting was for me. He was also never part of the journey. I needed to truly believe that I was backed. Then he needed to drop out. Then I really needed to be like, okay, why don't you try? And the name Trip on This came to me like that. And I was like, what am I going to call it? And I just heard it, Trip on This. And I was like, ooh, Trip on This? I was like, that's got to be taken. That's too good. It's not taken. Okay. Check every single thing. Not taken? Okay, interesting. That's a good one. I wrote down like 6 or 7 other ones behind it. Trip on that, like just other things. Yeah. Trip on this, trip on that. Like, what do we like better? And so I was like, okay. And as let's demonstrate, I'm like telling my 2 friends, I was like, okay, and I think I have the name. I think I'm going to call it, as I'm saying Trip on This, I like kick my bathroom door, like kind of like trip, but like don't hurt myself. I don't fall, but like I start to laugh. And I was like, oh, so you like it? Trip on This. And then it began my journey of Trip on This. And I'm going to have a sip of water because that's part 3 of this 3-part saga. It is. It's only been like 4 years, but it's been a whole lifetime for me. Like, this is every day. Okay, but this is actually a little segue before I go into the third part of this, is when my life before was filler. I filled my days. I don't even know what I did for most of my life. I would live for the weekend. That's it. I would just kind of go to work, have okay days. Not that I didn't like doing some of this stuff, but it wasn't my passion. So for me, I was just living for the weekend. I was just trying to like actually pass time. So here we are, like we want to be enjoying our life and like really treasuring the fact that we are here alive and breathing, and we only get a blip of this time. And yet here I am, so unconscious. That's all it was, just completely unconscious, that I was just coasting like a lot of people, right? I think that is part of the spiritual awakening, is suddenly realizing, where have I been? What have I been doing? Like, and by what I mean by doing, what have I been doing with my mind? Like, where am I? You know, that when you're like driving and you're like, you get to a location, you're like, how did I get here? Uh-oh. But like for a life, you know? So anyway, it really turned on that every single day became so intentional. And to live so intentionally is also exhausting. It's really tiring because there's when you're actually letting yourself like feel all the emotions and do all the stuff, it's a lot. And it's also the most rewarding and amazing and gratifying experience of life, is to go on the journey within. And so that is basically this third little part. And it's really around spirituality for me, and the intuitive part that I was mentioning, and how I live my life very, very differently now. I would say most people would be like, girl, you are out of your mind. I'd be like, maybe, but it's working. So I'm going to keep doing it, and I'm going to keep documenting it, just to see like maybe there's another way to live. Maybe that voice of intuition, maybe if we actually follow our heart, even when it makes absolutely no sense, might just be the direction that we're meant to go. And that logic, my dad always said, like, most of the world thinks in dollars and cents. sense as in SENSE, practical, logical, and safe. But like we all know good stories, like practical, logical, and safe is not we don't go to movies for that, you know? So in October 24th, okay, I was doing my tantra and I'm sitting on the bed and I'm going to my friends to watch a show. It's our like Halloween thing. And I say to myself, this isn't 2020. I say to myself, I'm ready to step into my power like blank. My other friend was very psychic, very spiritual, and had many gifts. And I was like, I want that. But I felt the minute I said like so and so, I could feel like a record scratch in the ether and was like, no, try again. And I was like, okay. I was like, I'm ready to step into my power. However, that's my expression, whatever that is. And I think that declaration in that moment set a ripple in the universe and I felt it because I was like, I think something just happened, actually. I'm driving and without getting into all the details, I had a mystical, spiritual experience that night that has changed my life forever. And, you know, I always said, I believe that there's more. I think that there's more. But then when you have a lived experience, it just then becomes knowledge, right? Like it just becomes like, that's not like a mental concept. That's a experienced thing now for me, right? And I'm always, spirituality and things is such a funny topic for people. So I always talk about it from like my point of view.
It was Vanderburg. Yeah.
What is it? We had a rocket launch just now?
Yeah.
Cool. That goes with this, right? Woo, psychedelics, baby.
Okay.
Yes, totally. Yeah. Um, I had a funnel basically of information that turned on that was just not there prior. And the idea of channeling and like intuition, like I didn't even know about that. That was not in my radar whatsoever. I didn't even know that there was a spiritual community. You know, it's like you almost like don't know until you know that people are having experiences like that. I was just like not in that loop. And of course, I now am trying to make sense of what is happening to me. I'm also having like a lot of like physical things happening to me, and it's blowing my mind. And I also had a massive shift in my friend group that same weekend. And I experienced an enormous amount of grief right after that. And I won't go into it totally, but that separation needed to be because I had pedestalized what my friend had made so much that what he did and his creation was more important than my journey. It was more important. Everything was this because I had put my own spiritual awakening, quite literally, to this thing. And somehow the universe is like, just a catalyst, but that's yours. And that this is now time for you. So I kind of had that like dark night of the soul for like 2021 of being like, what is happening to me? Like, what has happened to my life? Everything in my life. This is the not pretty part about the psychedelic awakening is when everything that is not in alignment for where you're going falls away. It's like a giant ego death that lasts for however long it needs to last for everything that was built, at least for myself. Everything that was built in the old life had to go. And that process was really scary because my friend groups were changing, my job was changing. Like My worldview had changed. I completely flipped upside down. I was like, I am lost. I'm scared. I'm alone. And I don't have any, and I don't know if anybody's going through this. I, at this point, had no idea. And then finally, somehow stumbled upon the fact that like there's an entire community of people that have had this experience. And I was like, okay. And so during this whole thing, now I had a ton of fear around trip on this. And like, how am I going to do this? I had no idea how I'm going to financially do it. Money was the big thing for me. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to pull this off. We're in COVID, all this stuff. You guys, all I kept hearing as my bank account is dwindling and I have bills. At one point, I had $200 in my bank account and $3,500 of bills in like a week. And I was like, okay, I'm losing my mind. But I kept hearing, you're going to have everything that you need. You could just have to trust that you're going to have it. And this was all tied to Trip on This because I kept wanting to abandon it. I had just started to build it. I just wanted to abandon it because I got scared. I kept getting scared of like, how am I going to do this? And I remember like I would get to the point where I would just start to laugh and I was like, this is so crazy, Kat. Like what is happening? But I kept hearing this, the channel of, was so clear at this time. And it was like, you're going to have everything you need. It was like radical faith. And I was like, okay. And then 3 days later, boom, $10,000 I could never have saw coming suddenly drops in. A tax return I couldn't have seen coming. I was like, what? I've never had a tax return like that. Never. Not even close. Maybe $2,000. That was it. I was like, what? Another thing like that, like much bigger, where I was going, I was like, don't know how this is going to happen. Have no idea. But I kept hearing, you're going to have everything that you need. You're going to have everything that you need. And I was like, and of course, I was always brought to like the very edge. It wasn't, you're going to have everything you need with like 2 months of buffer. So you feel nice and comfortable. No. It was like always like, I don't know what I'm doing. Am I like, what's happening? And then miracles constantly. And I was like, God, there's something is different. And I always say to people like, do I think everybody needs to live as radically as this? No, but I think my lesson was to actually be like, you're going to live on the edge of your faith and you're going to watch. And from there on, it has just been this, like, it went past, you're going to have everything you need. And then it went into creator mode. Okay, Kat, now that you've know that you can lean on this, now you need to start creating and stop hoping and wishing. Being a creator in this world is actually but doing it inspired. And I've now been featured in Forbes twice. This is the first, I had said when I went to MAPS and I was doing press for them, I had said, I want to speak like that on this stage. And the next week I said it to the universe and the next week I began. And now I host events. Now I do conferences and now I'm getting a manager. And all of these, and I'm still in it. Like that's the thing is like, I'm still on you're the bottom floor with me right now as it's like now reached a new level where like, okay, this is what you do. You got all this opportunity that's opening up. Now what? And so it's just been the most scary, worthwhile, exciting adventure of my life. And it is my deepest prayer that everyone listens to their heart and just goes for something. It doesn't even have to be a job. Something that's exciting. Is music playing? Am I summoning Shawn Mendes to the room? Shawn. I know you want to be here too. He's like, he agrees with following your heart. But really and truly, like, I think so often we go through life one way. It's the way that we're taught. And it's through the ego mind, right? This is how I think I'm supposed to do life. I have this kind of job. I make money. It's all of your parents and your community and everybody telling you this is how I'm supposed to live and feel. And we do that for a long time. And then people can have all the things. They can have the wife and the kids and the car and the house. And then they wake up one day and they're like, but I'm not okay. but I'm not okay. So now what? So I've been sold that I needed all of this stuff to be okay, but I'm not. So now what? And that, so now what is, again, that is the most exciting place to be because we can always start anew. And it doesn't mean restarting your whole life like I did, but it could be that, like, okay, I've given the mind its due and it's done fine. But what would it be like to actually follow my heart? What would it be like to actually listen to the intuitive voice, to take inspired action when you get that, like that, I always think of an inspired action idea is when something excites you. You get an idea and there's like, there's life to it. But then how often does that, we go, oh, that's a good idea. We should do it. And then life happens and then you just don't. And you're like, cool, somebody else is going to get it and they're going to run with it. Right? Like, that's why, like, why are there 2 Frankenstein movies coming out? Because 2 people got that, do Frankenstein, and they're like, yes, great idea, and brought it down, whatever that thing is, and then create and made manifest. So that's our part, right? Is like, we actually then got to do the thing. And it's to separate then from actually the achievement, because that's the next roadblock is what if I don't achieve? But I've had to do this. Am I not a success by going for my dreams if I don't hit some arbitrary number? Or is the success in going for it no matter what? The courage to take a shot no matter what happens. If you're on your deathbed one day, did you really go for it? Or did you replay it safe the whole time? And I feel like it's within that, like, that inquiry of just allowing for the greatest potential and version of ourselves to come through, life opens up in the most surprising ways, and it will delight and surprise in ways that we could never imagine. And that's my story.
Super appreciate you sharing all of that. And I just want to celebrate the manifestation that is you sharing your voice with our community tonight. And so I thank you for the cultivation you've been on in the last 4 years and what you continue to show up to daily for the refinement of everything that is your message and your uniqueness. So thank you so much for leaning in and following those whispers. And I tracked so many similarities between your journey and mine. And I want to share that something that really stood out to me is creating space to dream. That's not a part of the infrastructure of society. Right. So people don't necessarily consider letting themselves really tune into the types of relationships that they want, the lifestyle that they ultimately desire, how they want to feel in their bodies. And so I feel like if you all leave with anything, I hope that you create space to really ask yourself, what do I really want? And what would I really want if fear or money or what other people think about me wasn't in the way? And that doesn't mean any change needs to happen. That doesn't mean you need to act upon that, but simply sitting in that inward reflection, I feel could be really insightful.
Sure.
Yeah. So I feel like you said so much good stuff. And I feel curious about the trip on this podcast, in what moment it's in, if it is in a moment. And what have been some of your core learnings from the production of that podcast and the type of people that you speak to?
Yeah, that's a really good question because so our creations can sometimes feel like they trap us. Has anybody ever created something where they actually feel then trapped by their creation? Yeah. So you have to continue to reorient yourself with it, or else it becomes a drag like anything else, even if it's the thing you love that you created. It's your baby. So when I started Trip on this, I brought all of my corporate vibes into the creation of that, which looked like just crushing myself on deadlines for no one. There was no deadline. Like, who's waiting for your Trip on this episode? Except I certainly made it seem like the whole world. If I don't wait to be here till 3 a.m. to do this edit, like, somehow my life isn't going to work out. It was so fear-based at that point. And, but that's where I was at, right? Like I needed actually that kind of discipline in the beginning to actually create the structure. There's 92 episodes of Trip on This, and there would be way more, but I've had hiatuses and pauses because I've needed to continue to reorient myself around how can I continue to feel good about this? How can this be my service and my joy and work for me? Because in the beginning it was like, um, I was an editor, a producer, the creator, the everything person, and I also knew nothing. So I didn't even know how to edit or do anything. Like, so I learned every skill that you have, and it was a full-time job. So I wasn't monetizing anything. I'm spending money. I'm doing all of my time. I had no business savvy at this time, zero. And that was the first learning is like, I didn't go in with any kind of practical strategy. I was like, I am Kevin Costner, a field of dreams. I'm going to build it and they will come. Unfortunately, in algorithms, it doesn't exactly work like that. And it it did kind of work because I did build it and people did come. But had I waved my magic wand to be like, let's try again with a strategy of like, how are you going to monetize this? Like, how are you going to make this work for your life? But this is the thing is like, you never fall back. You just like fall forward. You know, you're just stumbling into the next. Like, I think I just stumbled my way through the past 4 years. And that's kind of how I learned. Like, I just like run into a wall and I was like, that's a wall. And then I'll run into it again just to double check. And I was like, still a wall. Okay, great. And I'll try like another way. And it's a lot of it's about like tenacity and like coming back to that deeper why. Because if you don't have the why, it's too hard. If there's not a deeper pull to share about like, why are we doing this beyond the self? Like, it's if there's not that, like, I feel like service is the root and the key of when something really works. Like that it's not just self-serving, it's for you. It's for others as well. And so I basically burned myself out on season 1, but I had a lot of growth at the same time in terms of like a new guest I was getting. The second season, I tried to then do less by doing like, okay, now I'm going to only do 2 episodes a month. Like, but at this point, I wasn't thinking about, Kat, your time is valuable. What don't you like to do? You don't like editing like this. Like creative editing is a little bit different, but podcast editing is just a lot of time. It's not fun. And it would get me down. And then I would get down on my project because I was too tired. And so my love was, and I would try and stop myself and be like, if you are resenting your project right now, just stop. Don't put that energy into this thing that you're creating. Just please pause. And at least by this point, because I was on my spiritual path, I was listening to that. I was like, okay, that's enough. Season 3 rolled around. I was like, time to get an editor, even if I feel like I can't afford it. My time and my well-being, I cannot continue like this. That's what I got to on season 3. I cannot continue like I did in the past. So if I want this to keep going, then I'm going to have to start investing in myself, period. I don't know what else to say about that. And then now in season 4, but it was still kind of dragging because it's a lot of time to do a podcast. It's not just getting in front of a mic and doing things. There's a lot to it. This is why most people, like the rates are like 98% that start don't keep going after like maybe episode 10. It's like, it's very, very high in the rate. And so now I've been shooting it out like movies, where I'm like, okay, I'm going to do a limited season. This one was it ended up being 11. It was technically 12, but I ended up airing 11 of them. And I got an editor and I just shot it out where I knew it was a contained amount of work, where I was like, okay, this is your focus. This is what you're going to give to it. And then I want to do other things. So that's what makes Trip on This feel right now, outside of having a team. If I had more, uh, um, like more of a team to do the stuff, there would be more episodes. But because it's just so me and my editor, I'm like, okay, how do I make it work for me? And that's going to be like in these little batches. Meanwhile, while I create other things, I want to create that space for myself ultimately.
Yeah, I love that. It seems like you came out of how your nervous system was programmed of like, oh, I might get yelled at today. And your nervous system was still learning like that's only onto yourself, what you're creating.
It took like at least 2 years
Mm-hmm.
for my nervous system to not be on a 9 to 5, maybe 3. Like, it took a long time to just like, can you, it's okay. You don't have to, you can work on Saturday and go to the beach on Wednesday, dear. What are you doing? Like, you have the fortunate to have your own schedule and you literally live like you live a 9 to 5. I just didn't realize. I was like, cat, girl, do something different. And it took a while.
Yeah, that's understandable. I mean, you spent a lot of years in another circuitry.
Yeah.
And I'm really grateful that you've risen to that realization that the beach is still available on a Wednesday and that your podcast can wait and that you want to infuse it with the energy of service that is that higher why.
Yeah.
So I totally resonate with that. And I celebrate you coming into a more flow based creative process. And my other curiosity is around your current psychedelic exploration. It seems like mushrooms were a major medicine for you in your journey. So, are mushrooms still present for you? In what capacity? What other plant medicines are you exploring these days?
Yeah. Interestingly enough, the one that's kind of calling me these days is not a plant medicine, it's LSD. I'm like really wanting to do like a bigger journey with it. Not bigger. Let me take that back. I would like to take 4 of those sunshine dots, which are only 10 micrograms. But I'm telling you, one for me, I was like, it was like 10 micrograms. And I was, but I think the curiosity for me is curiosity, actually. Like, is there something here? This is a molecule that I hadn't, um, I always used as fun, like just kind of like my dance molecule and things like that. But um, I do have like spacey galactic vibes, and I feel like LSD is kind of in that realm. I was like, can we get galactic maybe like in the desert? Like, I don't know. Like, can we? I'm down for a UAP. There's all this talk around it. I was like, let's go. So yeah, that's the one that is also from a joy sense. Like, I feel like there's a part of me that wants to explore that from a like a real like an adventure almost. Like, there's a part of me that wants to like bring some like fun and adventure back into my psychedelic experience. I haven't been having mushrooms as much. I love to like, but if I do something socially, like I love the Golden Path, like the drinks, like they have like something like this when it's here, or like a nootropic square. But the days of me like really those like psychonaut days, I don't feel the pull to do really big journeys right now. There's a little part of me that was like, I guess I usually now I think I look at it as more of a reset. I did a mushroom trip maybe about like 6 months ago, actually, and it was so beautiful. But mushroom trips are also for me, sometimes they're really difficult. They're really like it. I don't know. Sometimes they can be really physically uncomfortable. And I don't know which way it's going to go. Some of my best journeys have been like not fun at all. It's like, you should do this thing. And I was like, I don't want to. And it was like, you should really do this for your life. And I was like, no. And then it's me just fighting with myself for like 5 hours. And I was like, and it won't get off the topic. I was like, you know what you should do? And I was like, fine. And the thing is, I know because I listen to that. That's the thing. I follow my intuition. So when I hear something I don't want to do, I'm like, how dare you ask me that? Do I have to? Is there any other way? They're like, no. And then I do it. And I've done some really crazy things. I've done some really things people are like, are you sure about that? And I was like, no. But I'm going to do it anyway because, Spirit told me to do it. So here we are.
So I really understand that. Like the logical sense of self is like, no, I don't want to. But that higher aspect of self is like, you gotta.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do it, But I usually will negotiate and talk about it and until finally I'm like, okay, fine. And there's always a freedom in it, like I understand why, but self-preservation is very real. So if there's anything that's going to go that feels like it might, you know, infringe on your safety, whether that's like not physically, but like maybe it's literally a career move, or if it's saying something, or like, something that like feels like it's going to make you vulnerable. You're like, that that part of ourself that wants to protect ourselves is so real. So there's a really strong um, negotiation with that aspect.
Yeah. It's that primal aspect of ourself that needs community for survival.
Yeah.
And I feel like more than physical safety, it's like social safety of needing to feel included.
I think it's like, intuition, we all feel it, right? Sometimes it's kind of like, you should, let's use it as work. You're at your job and you're like, I don't like it here. And your spirit's like, yeah, because this isn't for you. And you're like, but I make good money here and da 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 da. And okay. And so that voice gets a little bit louder. I really hate coming, right? Like now it's like, it was passive before. And now you're kind of like, yeah, but no, this is good. You keep fighting, right? The voice, like, no, I don't, I like it. I feel safe, da da da. Like you're fighting against that voice. And then maybe suddenly you're now getting into like friction with your coworkers around something, and it's starting, your world is starting to, the earthquakes are starting to become more and more apparent until finally a full-on earthquake aftershock happens and you're then fired. Instead of leaving on a high note, right? And this is learning. There's no good or bad way, but if you knew at the coworker side, you're like, look, I know that I need to get out of here, so let me go on a high note. Let me be the one to start looking for new jobs. Let me be the one to start looking and doing this. It's like the sooner we start to listen, the path is a little smoother. But a lot of times, and this is just being a human, right? We wait until there's a shake and then we're forced to leave. We always were meant to. That's the gift, is like your spirit's like, get out of here already. I will kick you out if you don't take the multiple moments that we're given. And so it's like, and in many ways, like, I feel like listening to intuition can actually make life a little bit more gentle. It can actually smooth it out a little bit. So before life forces you into something, you get to be the one to be like, all right, you know what? I'm going to act before this is deeply uncomfortable.
Yeah, for sure. I love that perspective, and I feel that way as well. And it's very empowering to choose that change for oneself rather than that like waiting around to be guided or forced into that change.
Like, that was me at CAA. I was literally, my soul was screaming at me from like day one, get out of here. It was the first time I was like, I think I need to go to therapy. Uh-oh. I'm not fine. I was like, yeah, but I love it here. La, la, la. Or, what? And then, yeah. And then I remember the tunnel. Have you ever guys had something shocking where like all of a sudden you're just like in a tunnel, you can't even hear? Yeah. But that was the gift.
That was the guidance. I have one last question for you now before we turn it to the audience. So start to consider questions that you may want to ask Kat directly. But I am really interested in how you feel Tantra is related to psychedelic exploration.
Yeah. Well, I think psychedelics are like very sexual, personally. I'm like, I think like it's so embodied. And I don't think it just needs to be like sex and psychedelics. Like, when you're engaging with psychedelics anyway, it's opening up so much energy, and Kundalini energy is sexual energy. So it's just activating kind of all the time, I think, when in psychedelics. Now, channeling it, like, I, you were saying like, how are they related, right? Yeah, I mean, that would be the biggest thing, is like, especially if you consciously can work with molecules and sexuality, whether it's like alone or partnered, it can also be greater states of awareness and like heightened states of consciousness, and can also get you back into your body. I think a lot of times with sexuality, we're in our head. I think if you think about how the body works, a lot of people are watching something, or they're fantasizing about something, and it's from their head. So if you're fantasizing about something, it's actually a thought. It's not based on the sensation of your body that's happening. Now, if you can get very present with just the body's sensations, it can unlock a completely different experience. And so, yeah, I mean, it comes back to like Tantra to me is the conscious awareness that there's so much information in that flow of sexual energy that we have, and psychedelics can be almost like a catalyst for it because it just makes that energy flow so quickly. I always think like I'm in hyperstate so quickly in like meditative states, right? It's almost like a highway for, at least for me, like psychedelics like a highway into those higher states of consciousness. And I feel like I didn't answer that particularly great, but yeah, we did our best.
I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Okay.
And another thing that I caught earlier that you said is like that there's not a right way or a wrong way. And I really feel like that can be a tantric philosophy as well, that we're not going to choose wrong, but we will always choose in the way that we're guided to lead us to liberation. And I appreciate what you're sharing because it's real. People are not always connected to the aliveness of their being. And that is often associated with sexuality because that experience is what brings people into their feeling body. But what I feel you're saying is psychedelics awaken people to feel a sense of aliveness or even arousal, not necessarily related to a sexual turn on. But when we're connected to that aliveness and arousal by life, everything is transformed.
Amen.
Yeah, cool. Well, thank you for that. And I'd like to tune into the audience. We have a mic for you for those with questions. We'll take about the next 10-ish minutes for this. So if you have something you'd like to ask Kat directly, please raise your hand and Becca will come by with the mic.
Awesome. So first, thank you for sharing your story. It's been very amazing and empowering. So psychedelics helped you with your spiritual awakening, correct? Okay, so I'm just curious, like, was at what point with your psychedelic journey did you realize you're having a spiritual awakening? Like, was it a sudden experience, a gradual awakening? And if there is an experience behind it you would like to share with us?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's kind of like a two-part because my conscious, right? Because we're always coming to the moment in which we snap into autopilot and conscious, just being like, what have I been doing? Right? Like that point. So all my life, right? But in 2019, I was definitely in a more active process of my spiritual awakening. I was beginning to have inquiries about myself, deeper revelations about myself. I was starting to read spiritual texts. I read a book called Seed of the Soul by Gary Zukov, and that like changed my life. I was like, I had never read anything like that. And I was like, whoa. And my being was ready to hear that then because in the same way that even you asking the question is like your being is already you're in it's already in the process. Like this, you wouldn't even be in a place like this, right? If you weren't already kind of there. And so everything in my life was starting to come to me to begin the awakening process. I still didn't know what that meant though. I started taking care of myself actually. My spiritual awakening started to just be take care of your body, Kat. Take care of your well-being. Take care of really self-love was active self-love was the beginning of the spiritual awakening. And then I quite literally then did have a moment that was then a mystical experience that was like, holy shit. But I feel like you don't necessarily need that because we're always awakening. There's no like, maybe people hit like peak enlightened states, but it's a state and then it moves. Then you go back into fear. I've had the craziest, like, I'm crying, oh my God, I'm always going to believe, thank you. And then 2 months later, I'm scared and fear is back and if fear is always around. It's like, you might hit those moments of like, I got it. And then life. And so I feel like a constant evolving process and a maturing process, really. I mean, I think when I first had my spiritual like opening, I wanted to tell the world and I wanted to tell everybody they had messages and let me tell you about your angels. And I wanted to just share it because I was so thrilled by it. And then I realized, oh, not everybody wants to hear about their angels, cats. Not everybody is interested in messages from you, dear. That's not what we're putting down right now. And so there's just I think the journey of valuing and seeing our value and seeing our worth is the awakening process. It is quite literally seeing how fucking amazing we are. And from that point, everything opens up. The more that you love yourself, the more that you look at yourself and you're like, you are my dream boy, guy, man. You are I say dream girl. That's why boy, it makes dream girl sounds different. But the more that I see that and believe that, it my heart opens up. And that is it. Like it's just love. We all know that one, right? It is just literally loving ourselves and then seeing that love through in everybody else. And when you see it, people can't help but it's a mirror, right? It's just constantly like the more you believe that you're going to see miracles, the more you see them. The more you think you're going to see shitty people, the world just confirms it. It just gives you shitty people all the time. Be like, see, I'm right. Are you happy? No, but I'm right. So that's fine. And so, yeah, it's just an ongoing process.
Great story, by the way. Thank you. There's a lot of parallels, I feel like, even with my life. So it's good to hear someone else going through some of the same stuff. How I'm curious about how it went with your parents and, just the change and and family, because we can't always get rid of family and they're there. So, yeah, it's good. And then when you change, you kind of have a sense maybe that you're not the same person, so it's not your same family. So there's a lot of out of body kind of things. Like I'm just speaking from experience for me. Like, so just wondering about that.
So I came into this life, I definitely picked my parents for this journey because if I didn't have such unwavering support in them, I don't know how I could have done this. Like they have been behind me 100%, and I know that's rare. And it's one that what I would tell parents is I couldn't imagine a greater gift. And even when like financially, I mean, there's been so many times that they've needed to help me like in the process, like, and I'm like, I'm sorry, and then I'll do like little side jobs and things. But it has been one to have that kind of support, and it has never wavered. And there was times I thought it would, I think it was my own not wanting, like, I think it was like a lot about it, my ego also with it. And my parents are also seekers. They're spiritual. And that really helps for me in my case is that they are constantly on the evolutionary track too. And my dad's a gambler. My dad wrote a movie called California Split, and it's a gambling film. And so he's somebody who's like, you should give it your best shot. And we're here to support you no matter what. He's like, we'll go down with you, babe. And I was like, you are so fucking cool. Thank you. But obviously I know I'm a little bit of an outlier with that. So I'm sorry it wasn't probably what you've experienced with people being like, why are you changing like this? Because we only know the old you. I've experienced that more with friends.
Yeah. And actually, you've actually just opened something up because on one hand, it's not really like my question was almost based on a judgment, like, what did your parents think? And we can't pick our parents, but yet you've actually opened up another point of view, which is you picked your parents so that you could get to this point coming through as a spirit. And so that's a great reframe in a sense, so rather than look at the problem, it's like, well, how did that actually help me? Yeah, I think that was a really good answer, by the way.
Thank you. Oh, and my mom said, I told her, I was like, and I'm going to call it Trip on This. She's like, I love that. When I told them, I was like, I'm going to do a podcast and it's about psychedelics. They're like, really? And my aunt was there, my dad, and they all were like, cool. And I was like, what? I'm about to go on public and be like, I do drugs and they're changing my life. And I'm going to tell everybody about it. And I'm telling you, when I say like my old life was like this, like the side eye, like, what is she talking about? Who? And then so funny, the same people like way later, they're like, they look at the headlines, they're looking like, they just look at success. They say like, cats before what? Like, and it just changes. It just suddenly they're like, oh, And I think that's one of the harder parts is when you change. w- It is the hardest from the people that know you from the past to want them to see you differently because you are not the same, and trying to convince people that you're like it's hard when they're not seeing you that way, right? Like it's almost like with strangers it's almost easier. With the people that know you, for them to come around to an entirely new version of you, not just from like your personality, but now you're like this person. There is a landing process for them too, but that's also part of our right, like, process of being like, I know this is weird and it's okay. And whatever you're saying about me when I'm not here, like, I know the conversation's happening. As somebody who was very aware of that, who never wanted to be gossiped or talked about like that, to go into something like this was like one of my biggest fears is humiliation. And so I thought, oh, let me go directly into the thing that can lead to potential humiliation, which is to be on a public stage. What if I make a mistake? What if I say something stupid? What da, 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 da. And I was like, well, my spirit put me directly in line with the thing, like, maybe it could. And you're going to do it anyway. So it's a good question, though.
Thank you.
I would love to respond to that briefly as well. Something that you said about how people respond to you as they knew you however long ago. I have found it really helpful to just narrate that awareness and then offer an inquiry. Like, I'm in the psychedelic space and I'm in the tantric space. Those are like two really triggering things to most moms. And for me to be able to speak to my mom and say, like, hey, I'm aware of the anxiety that you're feeling around how my emotions are moving. And I wonder if you're aware of like feeling anxious in my presence. And that's understandable that you feel that way because in the past, when I've been emotional, I've turned to you to fix me. And I didn't have the tools then. And are like just inviting her softly into an awareness of where she's operating, with the intention of then stewarding her into a new relationship where she can feel the depth of my self-responsibility for the life that I've chosen.
Thank you so much for illuminating us with your journey. It was beautiful, and I resonated with so much of it. And I almost don't know where to start because there were so many parallels. But I'm going to go back to Hollywood because it's so broad and so fantastic and so horrible all at once. I know I work for William Morris for a president, for a partner,
President?
a partner.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Phones zooming across your yeah, almost. Mhm. So I'm curious, you mentioned that you had just gotten an agent, and I wonder what's next, and, will there be a movie, or what are you thinking about? Because this can be so different, and there's so many different ways that you could take psychedelics and your journey and your story.
A good question. So I don't have them yet. I'm talking to a manager right now, and I'm putting together a really interesting, fun reel situation. It's like not your usual reel. So I'm workshopping it actually with a friend of mine. But where would I like it to go? You know, public speaking is one piece of it where I am still actually asking the deeper inquiry of like, how can my story and my gift of communication help awaken someone else to their power and their beauty and their potential, right? Like what is the best way? And I find myself like, yes, I would like to speak and continue to share like that, but it's interesting that you ask because like have you ever like felt almost like an idea that hasn't quite landed, but it like hovers around you? That's what it feels like. Like I think of it actually as more of a company, to be honest, than like a creative project. Not that I don't want to do creative projects, but I think of a creative project as more like fun one-offs, unless it's like a TV series. And, it'd be cool to like, I don't know, I would love to host one. Like, I would love to host like a psychedelic show or something like that, or like talk to people about that. And yeah, I mean, to me, it really just comes down to like how can my story and gifts and like vision for like what's the best way to help others actually like from a different format. Like I'm not explaining this well because I really don't have a great answer for it other than like I honestly don't know. Yeah, I don't know. And I just the one like what's interesting is that even on like a state like on this I've been writing it down for a long time. Actually, that's why I keep bringing it up. This like TED Talk that I'm doing. And in the TED Talk, I'm literally talking like this, where I'm like, I wrote this vision over and over and over again, and you are it. You are it. You are my living manifestation of this. And then to actually talk about that. But I also know that there's more. I like creativity. I'm starting to do more skits and things like that. And so I don't know. I would also like to partner with some people that are doing really interesting things. You know, I've been doing this solo a lot and thinking like, how am I going to do it? How am and I haven't really been leaning on like the we and like aligning myself also with somebody who has an amazing idea, company, whatever it is, where I'm like, I believe in that. And I would then love to lend how I can help, whether it's be a spokesperson for them or, you know, to communicate it in a way that's helpful. And so I think that's been a new revelation for me is that it doesn't have to be my thing and that I can do multiple things. I can continue to do trip on this. I can continue to have the Miracle Zone, which is my microdosing, self-guided microdosing program. I can continue to do what lights up my heart. And I can also, yeah, lend myself to other people's visions that I believe are aligned with mine.
That felt like a new proclamation.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't said it out loud yet. Yeah. Shit. Ding. Okay. It's just figuring it out. That's when it gets mental for me, you know, is like how. And that word, how is I already know that word is such a cock block. How you don't worry about how. There's so many things that I've done. There's no to-do list for that. There's no how to do that. There's no how to get into Forbes. That was a miracle of series of events and things, and it came to me. And there is no how for that. I can't just pitch myself and be like, how about me? Like, they'd be like, who? Like, you know, like, and so, yeah, I'm really, this is, I think why I'm not being as articulate is because this December, this question is the question I've been asking myself is where are you putting your attention and focus and what are you asking for? When I'm clear, it shows up clearly. When I'm not clear, it doesn't quite manifest in the same way. Such never world. Yeah. That's the excitement. And I think that's why humans are afraid of their power is because they can go anywhere. And that's a lot. You're like, what if I choose wrong? I dealt with that one a lot. What if I choose the wrong path? What if I choose the wrong partner? What if I choose wrong? I would get paralyzed by choice. And I would have to really sit and be like, Kat, you're not nuts forever. Just go in a direction. And if you don't like it, change it again. Nice. Absolutely. Yeah, you get to it. Yeah, definitely.
I have a final few questions for you.
Yeah,
The intention is just to share sort of the first thing that comes to mind and to just let yourself be unfiltered, which you're good at. My first question is, who was your greatest influence and why?
I would say my dad. He is like just such a charismatic, fun-loving guy, and he is also like that gambler nature. And um, I just really admired the way that he could hold a room. And as a communicator, I didn't realize that at the time. Like, what about like watching my dad just like hold court is so fun for me. And I was like, oh, because you want to do that.
Yeah.
Oh, got it.
That's sweet. I like that. And if you could experience any psychedelic that you haven't yet, Is there one that comes to mind that you want to?
Yeah, I'd like to try 2CB at like a show or a festival or something. Yeah, I got this dude that was like, definitely try that. 2CB. 2CB. It's more of like it's not even a newer designer drug. But it's supposed to be kind of like a hybrid between MDMA and like LSD. Not exactly, it's its own molecule, but it's got a little mix of them both, where it's like a psychedelic ecstasy vibe, from what I hear. I haven't done it, but it was created by Sasha Shulgin, who created MDMA. There's a line of 2Cs, actually. There's a lot of psychedelics out there, actually. We know the ones that we know, but the 2C line, also from what I hear, is very different. It's like 2CI, 2CB, 2C, I don't know, another one. And they all have like very different like feelings. But 2CB is kind of the newest, I don't want to say newest, but it's the newest, most like starting to be used. Would you say that's right? Like more of like a newer, it's not new, but it's being used more now. And so
Having its moment.
it's having a moment for sure.
Yeah.
But I would like to have fun with it. Like it strikes me something like I'd want to be in like Joshua Tree with some friends, or like, or like go dance or something. Like it seems like an active molecule. Certain molecules, like have you tried it? Yeah. You're like,
Tried it the first time last weekend. So. I would probably try a smaller dose.
yeah.
A little goes a very long way.
Yeah. That's like everything, right? Toast is everything.
So huge.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. I feel like that was also a proclamation to CB is on its way to you.
I'll let you guys know next time.
And on another note, similar note, if you could have a trip with anyone, dead or alive, who is it and with what substance?
Oh my God, this is so funny. It's so weird that I'm going to say this out loud. I was like, Barack Obama? Oh, it's like trip with Obama. It would be hilarious. I don't know. And probably just mushrooms.
Yeah.
I'm not even like, Obama's not even like in my like everyday thought. Like I was like, it came in so fast that I was like, Barack Obama? Stop. Okay. Well,
When your ego doesn't want to say it, but spirit is louder.
I have yeah, it's literally because I was like, I don't know anything with politics. I was like, let me just like not say anything. I was just like, say it. Barack Obama. Okay.
Your next Forbes feature is this story of you and Barack having a mushroom journey.
Can you imagine? That's how my name gets out there. I was like, so I took him on a mushroom journey, and here's what we learned. Actually, here's what we found out. Here's some of his policy changes or something, I don't know, but.
My final question for you is, please do your best to synthesize in the most succinct way. How can you describe the nature of consciousness?
In the most succinct way.
As simple as one word, even.
Love. Love. Yeah. The actual, not like the emotion of love, but like this just is love. Like the energy of love. It's like that unconditional, like the fabric. That's like the longest, concise. I was like, and this and that. Love. Let's just go there.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, I super appreciate you bringing your vibrance to our space tonight. And thank you for letting us be witness to your manifestation powers. And may we continue to see you at District 216 at future events.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for coming out. Thank you.